Hold on. What's up, people? I am back. Supposed to do this video last night. I dozed off, so I'm doing it now. I have a little bit of time. Today I am gonna be roasting X-Men 3: The Last Stand, and then I will get to the other movies for sure. Like I said, sorry, just stupid camera. Fuck it. It's just not gonna. There you go. Actually. Alright, so I will be doing the other X-Men movies eventually, but, because it's Halloween, I kind of want to focus on horror. So I might, probably like next month sometime, I'm going to be going back and doing like First Class and all those. But figure, why not at least do the original three? And X3, man, I'm not going to say there's no good in here, because there is. I think, I'll admit the final battle was a little bit fun, had some fun parts. I liked the Brotherhood of Mutants for the most part, even though Psylocke one was never a member. She should have been in the X-Men, and all they did was just give her purple hair and only put her in like a scene. You wouldn't even notice it was Psylocke, so that was a waste. I think what we all know what the problem with this movie was. I mean, we could always talk about that they try to force the Phoenix story. That should have been 2 movies, but when you watch this movie again, you really realize how much of a backburner Jean takes. She just kind of disappears. She's just standing there in the background working with the Brotherhood. It makes no sense. Like, if you're going to at least have Phoenix be... She should have been the big chase. And also, this should have been its own movie. We all know. This movie should have just probably been about the Cure. I actually didn't mind that plot line. I actually think that would have been an interesting little story, Sorry, I'm just trying to... But, like, yeah, that would have been an interesting little story, because I actually liked the idea of it, and it fundamentally, clearly, the movie becomes about that anyway, because Jean, like, is just kind of relegated to the background until towards the end of the movie. So it's like, you should have just went with that storyline anyway. So the movie starts, we see a young Jean, which I'll admit, that scene was kind of cool. And the de-aging, for 2006 was alright, yeah. Watching it in, like, a 1080, 4K TV, it probably doesn't look great, but for the time, it probably looked pretty good, to be honest. And I thought it still looked fine for what it was. So that was cool. And then, oh yeah, we have Angel in this movie, and he's fucking wasted. They made such a big deal about him in the opening, but his only scene is just to save his dad, which is towards the end of the movie. He doesn't do it. He shows up at the school and then just kind of fades into the background until that scene where he saves his dad, and then we don't see him again. And if you do, I think he's like in one of the background scenes at the school in the end. But like, it's so bad. It's like Angel's one of those like OG members too, and it's like you don't do anything with him. No, and also he should not have been a kid. He should have been a bit older. I think he was like it looked like he was high school age. He probably should have been like college age or around the same age as Bobby, like probably. I did like that training room scene, where we get the scene with Colossus flinging Wolverine like in the comics. Okay, that was cool, but it was a training scene. But overall, it's just this movie's more negative. There was no reason to do the whole Phoenix story when she is a bit of a big deal in the beginning, obviously, and then I did kind of like that scene at the house where where Magneto and Professor X both go to talk to her, but then it just, obviously we get the scene where she kills him, which killing Professor X was retarded, especially if you're just gonna tease he was alive in the end. There was no reason to even kill him then. It was just shock value for the sake of shock value. That's what it felt like to me. And he decided, let's just kill him. Because there was no need for it. It didn't actually serve a purpose in the story. Just to tease he was alive in the end anyway. So that was dumb. You could have if he at least was part of the movie the whole time, the movie could have been a bit better just on that. Because I'll say, the scenes where, like, with Ian McKellen as Magneto was pretty good. Like, that scene where he's giving that speech that, like, nobody will be safe. I like that scene. I was like, okay, that's something from the comic. So, it's like, so Ian McKellen at least tried. It's just, They should have just went with one. And also, that whole love triangle between Bobby, Kitty, and Rogue was pointless. They didn't. There was no need for that. I like Kitty Pride, but you could have set her up with somebody else. You didn't need to do that. You already had set up, because let's be real, it's realistically it should be Rogue and Gambit, but they hadn't put Gambit in these movies, so they went with Rogue and Bobby. It's like, all right, I'm okay with that. I'm actually don't really mind them as a couple; they're fine. But it's like you should have just stuck to that instead of trying to force this like love triangle, because it just to me was just distracting. And they could have did something more with Rogue trying to get the cure, and I understand why for her character, because it's like, she feels like she's dangerous and she can't touch anyone. So it's like I understand that, but then it's like, don't write her out of the movie, because like, yeah, she leaves and then she's just gone and then she shows up again in the end. We know the other problem with this movie. It wasn't even Bryan Singer who directed. We know he left, unfortunately, to do another piece of shit movie called Superman Return. He should have saved for this one, because this just did not. It doesn't even feel like it's part of the X1 and 2. Even feel like they're part of it. I will say, Kelsey Grammer's Beast was really good. He is like easily some of my favorite things in the movie is some of his scenes, his interactions with Logan, and it's like it does make me like, man, he should have been in those first two movies. So, I will agree, or at least had been in the second one. But aside from that, like, I just think there's more negative. That final fight action sequence was good, but then, oh yeah, another thing, they really try to force the Wolverine gene thing in this movie, and it makes no sense when it felt like he kind of got over when he told Scott the last movie how she chose him. That sounded like the intention was, oh, okay, that he kind of moved on because he accepted. Oh, that's the other thing. They killed Scott. What a waste. He doesn't even suit up. He doesn't even wear his, like, the glasses, right? The visor. No, he just dies, because I get it. He's also in Superman Returns, and I bet you it was Brett Ratner being better. So it was dumb, man. They fucked up this movie. It's sad because how great X3 was. At least Spider-Man 3, I can still say I have some more positives, at least compared to this movie. Like, I have my problems with Spider-Man 3, but I'll watch it again before I watch this one again. In my mind, in a fucked up way, the real X3 is Days of Future Past. Because First Class is kind of a prequel, for being honest. So I look at Days of Future Past as almost like the real X3. So it's X1, X2, Days of Future Past, and then First Class like a prequel. So that's how I look at it, because this movie was such a disappointment. Um, and then, like I said, they tease Professor X is alive in the end. So it's like, what was the point of even killing him if you're just gonna do that? So yeah, overall, movie was a waste. Out of 10, fuck, like maybe a 4.5. I think they're like, the point 5 is because I do think Hugh Jackman still put on a good performance. Same with Ian McKellen. And I did like that scene with the bridge. I thought that looked kind of cool. And then, like I said, the final fight was decent, and there's some decent scenes here and there, but it's still more of a bad. And it's just on the structure. It's a bad movie. It's wedging too many storylines. You make such a big deal about doing the Phoenix one, but then you watch the movie, it feels like they more care about the Cure storyline. So it's like you should have just did that. And how I'd have done it is, you have Jean in the movie, but she's just part of the team, and then you do the little teases that she becomes the Phoenix, and then X-Men 4. If they had done a real X-Men 4, that's where you do the Phoenix story, not wedge it in this movie. There was no reason to do it in this movie. It just feels like that was such a back burner. And then look what ended up happening. They like went weird routes with the X movies after this. I mean, obviously they did that Bad Origins movie, which I'll admit I don't hate like most people, besides the Baraka pool scene. But then obviously they went like First Class. They never really did an X-Men 4. I guess kind of, if you want to call. I call it Days of Future Past. If you want to really call. If you want to keep this one canon, you can kind of look at that one as X-Men 4. But to me, it's X-Men 3 because I don't even. This one was such a disappointment, and I think it's biggest. It's just because how great X2 was, and this was just such a step down. So later tonight, I am gonna be watching The Conjuring for the first time, so I can't wait to talk about that. I really loved Insidious, so I'm interested to see where Conjuring goes. Tomorrow, it's still up in the air what I'm gonna be doing because The Exorcist, if it's up by like tonight or early tomorrow, I'll probably review that tomorrow because I'm hearing a lot of bad things. Like basically, I'm hearing it's kind of it sounds like what I'm expecting. Like basically a boring, predictable, you know, exorcism type movie. So it's nothing unique. So sounds like that's what we're gonna be getting. So I'm definitely not gonna pay for it now. I'm just like, yeah, I'm probably just gonna wait till the high seas. So if it's up by like tonight or tomorrow, like early tomorrow, I'll probably review that. But if not, I'll probably review Maniac Cop. We'll probably do that tomorrow. So it'll be one of those two. But anyway, let's get into Days X-Men The Last Stand. Oh, you want to know the other problem I have with that movie? They just randomly changed the theme. no, no, instead of just reusing the song from X2, which was, in my opinion, I look at that as like the real theme song. Even I think Days of Future Past even goes back and used that song. Like, why would you change it? Because the one they changed it to in this one is just generic sounding. It's like no need to change the theme. At least Spider-Man 3 kept that theme, so at least it's like, okay. This one, they like just randomly change it for no reason. So we see Jean in the beginning, which that was kind of cool. The DH Professor X and Magneto is still pretty good. Like, yeah, obviously if you look out on a current TV, it probably does not age well. But to be honest, compared to like, I was even thinking this when I was watching, like, this looks better than Leia from from Rogue One when they de-aged her, and that was 10 years after this movie, so yeah, like this was better than some de-aging, so and that's some of those are like 10 plus years after this, so it's like, I'll give him that. Then we see a young Angel cutting his wings, and his dad's the one that comes up with the cure. And then yeah, that's where the cure is introduced. Mystique's in jail, like she's and yeah, so Magneto reforms the Brotherhood. Oh yeah, I did like this scene when Wolverine's and Storm are training the new recruits like Bobby, Rogue, and Colossus, and that was the other issue I had with Rogue. They were like setting her up as like the future, and then she just kind of disappears. And I get it. They were going for. She felt like her powers were a curse, but then it's like there's not a moment. If you're gonna do that, there should have been a moment she realized it's not. No, they don't really do that. She just gets it and it just rekindles her relation with Bobby towards the end of the movie. So Magneto reforms the Brotherhood, who I'll admit this aspect was alright, even though I do feel like you could have given them a bit of design than just. They just look like a bunch of emo kids. I'm just gonna be honest. The way they're like all black and like you could have given them somewhat of a unique design. So Magneto forms the Brotherhood again. Him and Pyro, who I'll admit Pyro was cool in this movie. I did like him because he was a villain. So I like that they kind of got him right. So Bobby is starting to have feelings for Kitty because there's even a scene. This is after Professor X dies. I probably should, yeah. Yeah, so this is where we find out Scott realizes Jean's alive because he's like, he hears her voice and he follows her back to Alkali Lake, and this is where he dies. He dies off screen. He kisses her, and then Professor X feels something, sends Storm and Wolverine there, and then they find Jean. If you know what should have happened, they found her and she seems normal, and then like throughout the movie, little things start happening, and then by the end, she goes Phoenix. That's what should have happened. And then the X-Men 4 could have been the Phoenix movie by itself, in its own movie, without like an extra subplot. Because the you clearly could tell the Cure storyline was actually supposed to be the main plot. Because something tells me, like, kind of like the same way Spider-Man 3, where they forced Venom. Somebody forced the fucking Phoenix story because they probably heard that's like the probably. If I'm gonna be honest, that might be the biggest X-Men like storyline. That's like X-Men's like Dark Knight Returns. That kind of story. That's probably why, and they were like, we gotta force that in the movie because it clearly feels forced. It just doesn't, because even in the plot, it feels more about the cure. Because yeah, there's this cure that's made that can like cure mutants, and they all like react to it in different ways. Magneto's trying to basically destroy it, and um, Rogue wants to get it because it could cure her touching people, which I get. Like I said, I get what they were going for, but then because you can't even touch, and that's obviously where they're doing that whole subplot, the love triangle, which they didn't need to do. I don't like that kind of storylines in comics anyway. I think that's teeny bop shit. That should not be in comic kind of storylines. I think comic storylines are a bit above that type of writing. Just being me, just being honest. Um, I didn't really, like I said, killing Scott, who these movies have always kind of disrespected Cyclops a little bit. I love these movies, but I just got to be honest. I'm more of a Wolverine guy. I'm not even the biggest Cyclops fan, but they needed it. He deserved a bit better. I mean, I think he was good in the first movie, but even in like the second one, while I love that movie, he's kind of relegated in that one. There's only really two scenes where he actually feels like he's part of the Cyclops is the leader. He's like the Captain America in a sense for the X-Men, and he deserved a bit better treatment instead of just in this one he just gets killed off. And to be fair, I think this was a case of because James Marsden was leaving for Superman Returns. I wonder if that's what this was, because it was like a fuck you to him. It's what it felt like to me, anyway. So Wolverine and Storm find Jean, take her back to the house, and this is where Professor X reveals that the Phoenix. And I was okay with this explanation, but it felt like just a little justification for why they even did that storyline. It didn't really feel like it was just a quick explanation of like, oh, Professor X has been kind of hiding this side of Jean for years. That's really what it felt like to me. You could have went a bit more into it, and that just reeks of you didn't plan on doing that storyline. I bet you that was just the original plot. The original story is probably just going to be the cure by itself, and then they forced the wedge the fucking Phoenix in there. So Wolverine rakes up Jean, and he wonders which version of her is it. Obviously because he loves her, which makes no sense. It that line of from the last movie where Wolverine's like, "She chose you." That should have been basically Wolverine's moment of getting over, and maybe it was, but whatever reason they just decided to have him be in love with her again. It was so forced. There was no need. Y'all know I've never liked the whole Wolverine Jean thing anyway, because he never had a thing for her like that. Yeah, he had a little crush on her, but ultimately she was Cyclops' girl. Ultimately. And they just no, they just didn't want to move on from that. Even though Wolverine flat out said that she chose him. I always took that scene as meaning that he kind of has to get over. He basically got over, but now he's just back to drooling over her, and it almost ruins his character a little bit in the movie for me, because that seems like that's all his arc is in this movie compared to the last. I think that it hurts because Wolverine's arc in the last movie was so good, but getting over his past, and then it's like in this one, no, we're just gonna have him drooling over Jean the whole time, and that's basically what he was. He was just drooling over Jean every time, because then he ends up doing stupid shit like basically letting her go, so she frees herself, goes back to her house. Wolf, Xavier and the team go to her house, but also so is Professor Magneto and his Brotherhood, but the Brotherhood are told to stand back. Same with the X-Men. So Xavier and Magneto go in, and I did like the banter between the two. I've always loved. Sorry, I always loved their kind of back and forth and chemistry with each other. Like they really perfectly capture Wolf Magneto and Professor X's relationship in the comics. You know, like I said, they always respected each other, even as adversaries. So, and they both try to basically plead with her. Magneto, Professor X, try to get her back, out, and Magneto's basically trying to more force the Phoenix out. And because of that, Phoenix ends up killing him. But while this happens, we get a fight between the Brotherhood um and the evil. Oh, I should have mentioned. Yeah, I skipped over. Magneto freed Mystique, but she ends up getting shot with the cure. So Magneto abandons her, which is like such a waste. Like, why would you do that to Rebecca Romaine? She was such a big part of these movies. Some of my favorite scenes are her scenes in those first two, and then it's like, no, we're just gonna write her to get her cured. Why? Did you not? Were you not able to have like Rebecca Romaine for like a lot of the movie? That's what this reeks of. There's a lot of that. Like it reeks of, okay, we're gonna write them off because we don't have access to them for the movie. That's what it feels like. We get Multiple Man and we get um um Juggernaut, who I get what they were going for with Juggernaut. They didn't want to go overly big because they try to. You got to remember with these movies, the X Men movies did try to maintain somewhat realism. That's why, like, you notice the suits are still not like really style. Even though by this point they should have went with more stylized suits. In 2006, like we were going more comic book style anyway. I mean, yeah, we had the Nolan trilogy, well, the start of the Nolan trilogy with Batman Begins the year before, but look at Superman Returns. Same out came out, even though that movie's awful. The costume looks very still comic booky. It doesn't look exactly like the classic Superman look, but you could tell it's Superman. Obviously you still had the Raimi films at the time, so it's like they should have probably changed the suits and got rid of the black leather. Like it was fine for the first two, but it is kind of weird in 2006 that they're doing that. So, um, oh yeah, Angel's dad tries to basically cure him of his wings, and then he leaves. Angel was so wasted in this movie, man. And yeah, now back to Professor X dying. I really hated this. Why did you kill him? This was such a just shock value death. It didn't make sense. I'm not necessarily against him dying if it's earned. If you were maybe ending this chapter of the X-Men with these characters, I'd have been fine killing him in that. Like in Logan, he died in Logan. It made sense there. But doing it here made no sense, especially when obviously we get the reveal he was alive in the end of the movie anyway. So fuck off with it. There was no reason to do it. And it didn't make me, even the first time, I didn't really feel anything but anger because it was just like pointless. And I know people don't like that they killed Superman in Snyderverse, but at least it worked with Superman dying and coming back as as an actual comic story. This was dumb. This was just purely we needed like a big death and some shock, and it was stupid. Hated that they did that. So they have a funeral, and I did like the scene where Magneto tells off Pyro, who thinks, "Oh, I would have killed the professor myself," and Magneto like tells him off. He's like, the professor did more for mutants than you ever will, basically. Like Magneto always did have that respect for the professor. So I did think these movies have always got that right. I'll give these movies that. Like I feel like they've always got that aspect right. Like, yeah, even as adversaries, they've always had that little respect for each other. Even though, yeah, they may not be fully best friends like they once were, they still always did have that respect for each other. And I think that's the one thing these movies really did capture. I mean, these actors too specifically captured that. So I think that was good. So they start the Brotherhood start attacking like um bases for because they decide they're gonna steal the cure. Um Mystique or Raven. in her uniform basically gives the military information on and yeah, this is where we get that scene. I'll admit, this scene with Magneto like threatening humanity was really good. Like Ian McKellen acted his ass off in that scene. Like you felt like, oh, if this wasn't a good movie, that would have been so much better. So the professor decides, not the professor, the president, who was advised a little bit by Hank. I'll admit, it was cool seeing him. I just wish. Only problem, it just he should have been in the second movie because it does just feel like he just randomly is here now. They don't really explain how he's here. They just feel he's here now. So it's like they should have brought him in towards the end of the last movie or something. But so the president decides he's gonna wage a war of his own and arm the military with like these cure weapons, basically that are metal and all that. And yeah, so they get the location of Raven, Miss blah, of Magneto's hideout. They find it, and it turns out that the people they see are just Multiple Man. Who it was cool. He was fine, but he was just there for that scene, and then he's gone kind of for the rest of it. But before that, Wolverine finds here's Jean, who's with Magneto, and even that scene where he gives the speech was really well done. And then yeah, Magneto beats up Wolverine, and then yeah, so Wolverine goes back to the house and basically tells Storm and the team to get ready. Magneto, his real plan is they're all at Alcatraz so they can invade it, so they can kill. Because apparently, a boy named Jimmy, he's the one who actually like creates the. He's basically the recipe for the cure, so they want to kill him for it. And the scene where Magneto does carry the Golden Gate Bridge, I'll admit that looks cool. Like that actually looks pretty dope. Like, not gonna lie, that looks kind of cool. That was cool. So I'll give it that. And then yeah, Rogue runs off because throughout the movie, she's starting to see that Bobby is slowly having interest for Kitty. So yeah, she runs off, and then she's just kind of gone until the end of the movie. It's just like Mystique. They should have never did that. They set up Rogue and Bobby, and it's like you should have just stuck with that. Don't do a stupid love triangle that really doesn't even add anything to the story. It was cool having Kitty Pryde in it, Ellen Page. I'm gonna say it, it's Ellen Page. Um, Thought she did a good job as that character. Wouldn't have minded if she played her again. Um, it was, but the whole love triangle was just dumb. I didn't need it. There was no need for it. You already set up Rogue and Bobby as a thing. Granted, it should be Rogue and Gambit, but whatever. So they get to the battle. So the X-Men show up and we get basically a big battle, which was pretty cool. And I'll admit, my favorite Juggernaut moment this whole movie. I'm the Juggernaut, bitch. Like, I'll admit, that was a good scene. I will always love that. That scene will be a classic. That's one of those scenes that will live on. But yeah, so they end up taking out a lot of the bad guys. Magneto's the only one left. So then Wolverine and I keep thinking Cyborg, Colossus, do that trick where Colossus flings Wolverine. He does it and gives Magneto the cure, and basically his powers are taken. Then this is where Jean finally gets involved, and it was so dumb. It's like clearly you could tell that the main storyline for this movie was supposed to be the cure, because it even in pacing, the cure feels like the bigger plot than Jean. She fades into the background for a lot of it. She's just standing there, and then yeah, in this final battle, she just stands there for a bit until it's her cue to actually get involved. It is bad, man. Like the final fight is all right, like I guess. And like the scene where Wolverine was, because he's slicing this dude, and this dude can grow arms back, and he just kicks him in the nuts, and he's like, grow those back. It's like, okay, there's little moments like that, but yeah, when Jean gets involved, I tune out, and then Wolverine's the only one who can take her out, so he stabs her, and then I guess she dies. Because she basically, real Jean wants him to kill her, because she can't carry the whole Phoenix thing anymore. It was such a waste. What a waste of such a great storyline. You could have saved it for another movie. You should have just... Oh, Angel, his whole arc was just because his dad gets taken by the bad guys and they throw him off a building, and then Angel saves him. That's it. That was his whole point in this movie, just to do that. It was so bad. Like, he literally doesn't even do anything else but that. Anyway, so the fight's over. Storm basically takes over the school. There's a scene where it shows that Magneto has a little bit of his powers, and then we see that Professor is alive, and we see Moira McTaggart, she's in the comics. And it was cool. We finally see that character, and she's barely in it. You throw her in the end just to tease Professor's alive for no reason. Then it really solidifies you didn't even have to kill him, because you could have had him involved in the story. But yeah, this movie is awful. This movie was such a disappointment just because how great the first two were. Bryan Singer never should have left, because obviously y'all know how I feel about Superman Returns, and I'd argue that's worse than this. But Bryan Singer should have stuck, and they should have just went with the Cure by itself. No Phoenix stuff. Maybe you tease it, but you don't actually. That's not the plot of the movie. And oh yeah, Rogue comes back in the end and like rekindles with Bobby. What was the point of writing her off the movie anyway? Like, you write out so many elements of the movies that actually, especially the Mystique, that bothered me. She was like one of the greatest elements of those first two movies. Some of my favorite scenes are the scenes where Mystique's undercover, like, and then you just not kill her, but you basically just write her off the movie. Because, I don't know, was Rebecca Romijn filming something else and she couldn't commit to the movie the whole time? And that's what that reeked of to me. So, I wouldn't recommend this one. I just watch X1 and 2 and then just skip to Days of Future Past. That could be like a real X-Men 3. Because this was such a disappointment. The Wolverine Jean stuff was annoying. Like, it was obnoxious. If anything, it made Wolverine just do stupid shit. Like, he went on his own and get Jean back, and then he just gets his ass kicked. It's like he just was only doing it just, it's for Jean, but then he does retard. Like, he basically is the one who woke her up and let her go because he loves her. It's like, come on, dude, you woke Wolverine kind of like a retard in this movie. And I love Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, and I thought he still performed well, so I can almost okay, but it's still written like a dumbass, and I can't it's still there. So 4.5 out of 10. It's just not a good one. I get it if you can find some positives. I can see it maybe being better than some current MCU movies, but it's still not good. I think to me is in my list of very disappointing comic book films for sure. Especially just how good X2 was, and then this is your follow-up. Yeah. Yeah, this wasn't good. So that's really all I can say. At least for the next few X-Men movies, I'm not gonna do Origins. I think I might just stick with the main line. This Origins is just, I might talk about Origins in the First Class video, but I'm just gonna stick with the main X-Men specific movies, not the spin-offs. So a Deadpool I'll probably do on its own, maybe, I don't know. But the main, at least for now, the main X-Men movies. So I'm not doing Origins because that's an origin, and that's more of a Wolverine movie. I barely look at that as an X-Men movie besides the little member berries you get in there. So I'll talk about it in the First Class video really quick. But other than that, like I said, I probably will not get to the other X-Men movies till November because I want to focus on horror right now. So I'm gonna pause it a little bit on the X-Men movies for the time being. I at least wanted to get to this one because I had to take this one apart. So, but anyway, tonight I will be reviewing The Conjuring, so that's gonna be nice. I love doing reviews of movies I've never seen before. I love it. It makes for fun videos. It's a never seen. So yeah, I'll be talking about that later. Tomorrow, like I said, it's either gonna be an Exorcist reboot review or Maniac Cop review. So I'll let you know. But anyway, guys, I'm gonna cheers and I'll talk to y'all later this evening.